Most women don't realize the power they hold until they stop speaking. Not through shouting, not through warning, but through silence. A silence so vast it echoes in a man's psyche like the ghost of something lost, or perhaps something never possessed. It isn't the absence of noise that shakes him, it's the absence of her energy, her attention, her presence, once subtle, now vanishing into a void he cannot name. And in that void, something ancient stirs. Carl Jung once spoke of the anima, the inner feminine that lives inside every man's unconscious. She is not a person, she is an archetype, a symbol, a reflection of his longing for wholeness. And when a woman steps into his life bearing the traits of this inner feminine, mystery, nurturing, chaos, intuition, she awakens something more than lust. She awakens his soul's hunger. But she does not belong to him. And when she retreats, not out of anger, but out of knowing, her absence pierces him deeper than any presence ever come. Imagine this. You're no longer texting him. You're no longer explaining yourself, shrinking to make him comfortable or begging to be seen. You've stopped, entirely, not out of pride, but out of realization that your value was never in your effort. It was in your essence, and your absence now speaks louder than any words. He doesn't know why he's pacing, why his thoughts are spiraling, why the things that once distracted him now feel hollow. But you know, because your silence isn't emptiness, it's a mirror. And what he sees in it is himself, unfiltered, confronted, unmasked. This is the secret few understand. Feminine absence is not passive, it is active. It is the soul's refusal to pour into something unworthy. It is the withdrawal of divine energy, and it devastates. The Stoics taught that detachment is freedom, that true strength lies not in control, but in the letting go of that which was never yours. And what is more powerful than a woman who lets go, not from pain, but from power? A woman who, after witnessing a man's potential and his refusal to rise into it, turns away and becomes untouchable? In Jungian psychology, when a man loses a woman who reflected his anima, he is not merely heartbroken, he is fractured, because he projected onto her the qualities he had not yet integrated in himself: softness, mystery, soul, creativity. Her presence allowed him to feel whole without doing the inner work. And when she leaves, he is left face to face with the work he avoided, the confrontation with his shadow, the emptiness within, the unhealed wound of the mother, the inadequacy he never addressed. And you, the woman, you are not his mother. You are not his therapist. You are not his mirror to polish his ego. You are the fire he tried to contain. And when you leave, your silence does what your voice never could. It forces the reckoning. He may not admit it. In fact, he may demonize you, dismiss you, or mock you. But that's only because it's easier to visualize a mystery than to stand naked in front of it. He will feel haunted, not by your body, not even by your love, but by your absence. Because you offered something he couldn't hold, sacred feminine energy. And now that energy is gone, withdrawn, silent, and in its place is the echo of his own soul calling out for integration. Has this ever happened to you, where your silence became the storm? Where a man who once seemed indifferent began unraveling after you stepped away? That is no coincidence. That is archetypal energy at play. That is the anima being ripped from his unconscious grasp. That is your power returning to you. And yet this isn't a game. This is not manipulation. This is a rite of passage. There comes a moment in every woman's journey when she realizes her worth is not proven in devotion. It is revealed in detachment. And when a man feels that detachment, not as punishment but as inevitability, he faces the very thing he's run from his whole life: himself. This is the psychology of absence. This is feminine mystery turned inward. This is what happens when a woman chooses herself. The feminine in her most awakened form does not chase, does not explain, does not beg for recognition. She simply is. And when she withdraws, when her radiance folds inward, the world around her feels the eclipse. especially the man who once bathed in her light without understanding its source. Carl Jung taught that what we do not make conscious will appear in our lives as fate, and to the uninitiated man, your silence becomes fate. He does not yet realize that your absence is the consequence of his unconscious patterns, his avoidance, his arrogance, his fear of surrendering to something he cannot control. The woman who walks away without noise forces a man into confrontation with all that was buried, his unhealed past, his addictions to validation, his fantasy of the perfect woman who requires nothing in return. You were never that fantasy. You were real, and that terrified him. Feminine silence is not weakness. It is ritual. It is sacred refusal. It is the moment when a woman ceases to overfunction, to carry, to compensate. It is when she allows the natural order of things to unfold, even if that means watching him fall into the abyss of his own making. She does not scream into the void. She leaves the void to echo with the memory of what once was. And for the man who is still deeply tied to ego, this absence becomes unbearable, because she was never just a lover. She was the key to a deeper realm of himself, one he was not ready to explore. And now, without her, he must choose: descend into the shadow alone, or remain fragmented, haunted by what could have been. This is where obsession begins. Not love, obsession. A psychological hunger triggered not by your beauty, not by your voice, but by your withdrawal. You stopped playing the role. You exited the stage. And in doing so, you shattered the illusion that he was in control. He may reach out. He may test your silence. He may say just enough to see if the door is still cracked. But you have already crossed the threshold, because you finally understand that the most powerful women don't return to the fire that once burned them. They become the fire. This transformation is not without grief. For the feminine, silence is also mourning. Mourning the version of herself who gave too much. Mourning the dream of what the two of you could have been if only he had met you halfway. But grief is not the end. In the language of Jung, grief is the alchemy of the soul. It is the dissolution of old identities, and from it, the true self is born. You are no longer the woman who waits. You are no longer the woman who explains her worth. You are no longer the echo of his needs. You are your own sound, your own voice, your own pulse. And while he wrestles with the absence, you are becoming whole. He will feel it, not just emotionally, somatically, in his body, the ache in his chest when he thinks of you, the tightness in his throat when he remembers your silence, the coldness in the air when he walks past the places where your energy once bloomed. This is the psychic imprint of the feminine, not in presence but in vanishing. It is said that the feminine teaches through presence but transforms through absence. Your silence is not a weapon. It is medicine, bitter, necessary, awakening. It brings the truth he tried to escape into sharp, unrelenting focus. And here's what most women never fully grasp. When you become truly silent, when you detach from outcome, from rescue fantasies, from being chosen, the very energy you withheld becomes sacred. Not just to him, but to you. Because it was never about him. It was always about remembering yourself. There is no vengeance in your quiet, only clarity. Only distance, only truth, and that truth speaks louder than any word you could ever say. The man, now alone with his own echo, begins to feel the weight of what has been lost. Not just the woman, but the reflection of possibility she carried. In Jungian terms, the anima has withdrawn, and he stands on the edge of a psychological desert, unsure of how to navigate the emptiness. The woman is no longer there to validate, to soothe, to reflect light back at him. And without her, he is stripped of the illusion that he was ever whole. This is not cruelty. This is cosmic design. The feminine, when disrespected or unmet, does not retaliate. She evaporates. And in her wake, the silence blooms like smoke. Impossible to hold, yet impossible to ignore. Her absence becomes the ink in which his regrets are written. And it is here, in this silent reckoning, that a man is offered the rarest of chances, to confront his shadow or to remain enslaved by it. For the woman, this withdrawal is sacred. It is not collapse, it is resurrection. She has faced the ache of giving to someone who could not receive her. She has tasted the exhaustion of explaining her disactional death. And finally, she has chosen the most radical act of self-love, to stop. Not to punish, not to manipulate, but to preserve herself. In ancient philosophy, the Stoics spoke of apatheia, not apathy, but a serene detachment from the chaos of others. The mature feminine knows this. She understands that her peace is more valuable than her proximity, that her energy is a currency, and not all men can afford her presence. So she invests it inward. She waters her own roots, and from this soil, something new begins to grow. Sovereignty either numbs, escapes, chases, or he begins the long and brutal descent into himself. He starts to see the patterns, the ego games, the emotional withholding, the fear of intimacy disguised as logic. He remembers her words not for what they said, but for what they meant. And every time he tries to replace her, he is reminded it wasn't her body that stayed with him. It was her essence. Meanwhile, she is changing. No longer the woman who dimmed her light for comfort. No longer the muse of a man too afraid to meet her gaze. She becomes elemental, like the moon, always full, even when hidden. Her silence does not ask to be understood. It asks only to be respected. And you, the woman listening now, you may have been conditioned to believe that silence is weakness, that love must be loud to be real. But consider this. What if silence is the deepest form of self-respect? What if walking away is not abandonment, but a homecoming? What if letting him feel your absence is the only way he'll ever know what your presence truly meant? This is not just psychology. This is alchemy. This is the transmutation of heartbreak into power, of disappointment into clarity, of silence into song. And yet this path is not without ghosts. There will be moments when you miss him, moments when you question the silence, moments when you wonder if he thinks of you too. But know this, your silence is not empty. It is full of echoes he will hear long after you've stopped listening. Because a man may forget the sound of your laughter, but he will never forget the silence that followed your last goodbye. In the depths of this silence, something ancient stirs in both the man and the woman. For her, it is the memory of who she was before she twisted herself to be loved. For him, it is the confrontation with the unloved boy within, the one who still believes that emotion is weakness, that control is safety, that intimacy is conquest. He now walks through the ruins of what he once dismissed. Text he ignored, the gaze he looked past, the softness he mocked. He realizes too late that your silence was never an ending. It was a turning point, the moment when the sacred stopped offering itself to the unready. Jung wrote that wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of light and shadow, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious. When you left, you became the wound and the invitation. A wound that reminds him what he has lost, an invitation to finally see himself without illusion. And for you, the silence becomes a sacred space, a temple, one where you begin to unlearn every lie told to the feminine. That to love is to wait, to serve, to lose yourself in his becoming. Now you become. You wake up differently. Your joy no longer depends on his attention. Your reflection no longer carries the ache of hoping he'll finally see you. You see yourself. And this sight, this clarity, births a deeper rhythm in your life. One man can own, only honor. It is here that the feminine discovers her true seduction. Not in the pursuit, but in the presence. The man who was once intoxicated by your availability now feels the ache of your absence like a fever. He may try to replace you, but what he seeks isn't another body. It's your energy, and that you have reclaimed. This is the paradox of feminine power. It is not loud. It does not demand. It simply withdraws. And the masculine, if he is still ruled by ego, will confuse this with rejection. But the awakened man, the man willing to descend, we'll recognize it as a rite of passage. In mythology, the descent into the underworld is the journey of the soul. The feminine absence is such a descent. It strips a man of his armor. It forces him to see his reflection in the shattered pieces of the connection he neglected. And if he dares to walk through the pain, not numb it, not replace it, but feel it, then and only then does he begin to transform. But this transformation is not your burden. Your silence is not a tool for his enlightenment. It is the boundary that protects your becoming. Because while he is just beginning to awaken, you are already rebuilding. Not a new version of yourself for him, but a return to your essence, the self before the distortions, before the roles, before the shrinking. You start to notice beauty again, not in him, but in the world. The way your breath slows when no one is demanding it, the way your eyes soften without being watched, the way you no longer ache to be chosen, because you've chosen yourself. He will feel this shift, not because you told him, but because the part of him that was fed by your energy now hungers. And yet, you no longer serve from starvation. You no longer bleed just to be touched. You have become the woman who nourishes herself first. And this terrifies him, because you were once his mirror. Now you are a window into something he cannot reach, not until he meets himself. He will call it mystery. He will call it loss. But you will know the truth. He is finally feeling what you felt all along. This is feminine alchemy. Not the kind found in fairy tales, but the kind born of fire and silence and sorrow turned into selfhood. You are no longer the echo of his desire. You are the voice of your own becoming. There comes a moment when the feminine no longer waits to be understood, and that moment changes everything. It's not loud. It doesn't arrive in a storm. It comes quietly, like a closing door, like the last breath of something sacred that has outgrown its place. The man, if he is still asleep to himself, may not notice the exact second it happens. He may still believe he has time. But deep within, his psyche begins to unravel, not from your words, but from your silence. Not from your absence alone, but from the meaning behind it. Because you didn't just walk away, you withdrew your essence. And essence, unlike attention, cannot be faked, bought, or replaced. In Jung, that convinced Jungian terms, the anima has retreated. She no longer animates him from the outside. He is left with his projections collapsed, his fantasies exposed. What he once called love was often possession. What he called connection was, at times, addiction. And now, in your silence, he begins to see the depth of what he never touched. You, the woman who brought soul into his space, who mirrored his potential without demanding his perfection, who loved him with the mystery of someone rooted in herself. And still, he could not meet you there. Not because you were too much, but because he was not yet whole enough to receive you. And so, you did the hardest thing a woman can do. You left, not because you stopped loving, but because you started loving yourself more. This is the rite of the sovereign feminine, the transformation from muse to mystic, from longing to liberation. You stop orbiting his emotional availability. You stop justifying his indifference as depth. You stop mistaking crumbs or connection. And in doing so, you shatter the invisible contract that too many women are conditioned to sign: give more to be loved more. No, not anymore. Your silence is the breaking of that contract, the sound of old beliefs dissolving, the quiet echo of a woman remembering her name. And yes, it will echo in him too. Perhaps not today, perhaps not tomorrow, but one day, something ordinary will awaken the memory, a scent, a song, a moment of stillness, and he will feel the hollow space where your energy once lived. And in that hollow, he may finally ask the question he was too proud to ask before. Why did she leave? And the answer will not be your fault. It will be his awakening. If he is brave, he will begin the descent. He will face his shadow, the parts of him that sabotage intimacy, that silence emotion, that fear feminine truth. He may enter therapy. He may seek solitude. He may begin to speak the words he never could while you were near. I didn't know how to receive her. But that journey is not yours to guide. You are not his lesson. You are not his reward. You are not his redemption. You are the spark that reminded him he had work to do and the flame that returned home to herself. And as you walk this path, this sacred withdrawal, you will feel both ache and peace. Ache for what could have been, peace for what now is. You will remember the softness you once offered freely, and you will bless her, that version of you, because she loved without armor. But you will not return to her, because you have grown. You have become the woman who no longer needs to be heard in order to feel powerful. The woman whose silence speaks volumes. The woman whose presence is a gift, and whose absence, a lesson. Let them learn, let them wonder, let them feel the void you leave not as a punishment, but as an initiation. Because once a woman knows her worth, she becomes ungraspable. And so the cycle completes. What once felt like abandonment now reveals itself as liberation. Not just from him, but from the you that needed him. The woman who twisted herself into softness, who swallowed her rage and called it patience, who mistook proximity for love. She is no longer here. In her place stands someone older, wiser, quieter. A woman who has learned that silence is not absence, it is alignment. The man, if he dares to follow the path your absence illuminated, may arrive at a deeper truth, that the woman he lost was never merely a person, but a mirror of his soul's missing pieces. Your love was a portal, your presence a home, and your silence? It was the gate closing behind him, asking him to grow. But not all men will choose to walk through that gate. Some will continue chasing shadows, seeking you in the bodies of other women, confusing attraction with healing, still terrified of the depth you offered so freely. These are the ones who may speak your name in bitterness, not because they hate you, but because they are haunted by the memory of what they were too afraid to claim. Others will finally begin the inner journey, the one you could not walk for them. They will remember you not as the woman who left, but as the woman who returned to herself. And in that memory, a new kind of respect will bloom. Too late, perhaps, but no less real. As for you, you are no longer waiting for closure, because you now understand. Closure doesn't come from his words. It comes from your choice to no longer need them. You've grieved. You've sat in the silence you once feared. You've learned to love your own company more than the illusion of being chosen, and in that solitude, something divine has been reborn. Not a new identity, but the unburdened essence of who you've always been. You walk into rooms differently now, not demanding to be seen, but knowing you are felt. Not proving your worth, but embodying it. You've become the woman whose energy speaks before she does, and whose silence lingers long after she's gone. You see, the feminine does not become powerful by acting like the masculine. She becomes powerful by remembering her nature, receptive, intuitive, magnetic, deep. She does not need to convince. She does not need to perform. She only needs to be. And when that woman chooses silence, the world listens. Men feel it in their bones, the ones who are not ready, the ones who still replay old conversations, searching for the moment they lost you. They feel the ache, not just of what was, but of what was possible with you. And that ache does not fade, because you did not just leave. You became something greater in your leaving. You became a lesson, a symbol, an echo in the chambers of their soul. And if they grow, they will thank you. If they don't, they will remember you as the one who got away, but not because you ran, because you rose. And now, you move through life with a different kind of power. Not loud, not chaotic, but sovereign, grounded, free. You give from fullness, not from hunger. You speak when it matters, and when it doesn't, you let your silence carry the message. You are no longer waiting to be understood. You are no longer afraid to be alone. You are no longer chasing the illusion of love. You are love, refined by fire, shaped by grief, crowned in your own worth.